Mr. President, over to you. The strategic shift in the Iran conflict. The war in the Middle East is not ending soon, but something important has changed. The intensity of the conflict is already declining over the past weeks. Iran's missile and drone attacks have dropped sharply. Israeli and American strikes have destroyed a large portion of Iran's missile production facilities. Several Iranian mine-laying vessels have also been eliminated, and intelligence reports suggest that the Iranian Revolutionary Guard has already consumed a large share of its available missile inventory. On the surface, this may look like the beginning of the end, but it is not, because lower intensity does not mean the war is over. In reality, the conflict is entering a new phase, a long, low-intensity confrontation, one that could last months, possibly longer. The first reason is political. Negotiations are currently almost impossible. Washington has rejected several mediation proposals from regional partners. The American position remains firm. Officials argue that Iran has already suffered a decisive military defeat, but they also insist that the current terms offered by Tehran are unacceptable from Tehran's perspective. The political situation is even more complicated. Power inside Iran is fragmented. Civilian officials, including parts of the diplomatic establishment, have signaled willingness to discuss a conditional ceasefire, but the real power lies elsewhere, inside the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps and within the circle surrounding the new leadership. These factions reject compromise. They argue that the country must respond to what they call foreign aggression. Public statements from Tehran have emphasized two objectives: retaliation and disruption of maritime traffic. In the Persian Gulf, this internal division creates a dangerous dynamic, because even if civilian officials want negotiations, they may not control the actors capable of stopping the war. At the same time, the Iranian military itself is showing signs of strain. The regular army, known as the Artesh, is facing supply shortages. Reports indicate that desertions are slowly increasing. Tensions between the regular army and the Revolutionary Guard have also intensified. This institutional rivalry is not new, but the war has amplified it, and that fragmentation makes coordinated diplomacy extremely difficult. In other words, there may not currently be a single Iranian authority capable of negotiating a comprehensive settlement. That is why the probability of a near-term peace agreement remains extremely low. Instead, the conflict is likely to transform into a prolonged war of attrition. Direct missile strikes may decline, but indirect confrontation will continue. Proxy attacks, covert operations, cyber warfare, and persistent harassment of commercial shipping. Nowhere is this pressure more visible than in the Strait of Hormuz. This narrow waterway is one of the most critical choke points in the global energy system. Nearly 20% of the world's traded oil passes through this corridor, but today, the strait is effectively paralyzed, not because of large minefields, but because of fear, missile threats, drone surveillance, explosive boats, and insurance costs that have surged to extraordinary levels. Commercial shipping companies are simply refusing to enter the region. Traffic volumes have dropped dramatically. In practical terms, the strait is almost closed. Iran has deployed a limited number of naval mines. Current intelligence estimates suggest fewer than a dozen mines have been laid so far. This number is surprisingly small. Iran is believed to possess between 5,000 and 6,000 naval mines, but those reserves have not yet been fully used. American and allied forces have already destroyed multiple Iranian mine-laying vessels. Several key logistics sites, including storage facilities, have also been targeted. This means the current disruption is driven less by physical mines and more by the broader security environment. Ships do not need to hit a mine to stay away. The mere possibility is often enough. Military analysts believe that if Iran avoids large-scale mining and reduces harassment operations, partial shipping activity could return within several weeks. But if tensions escalate again, the disruption could last much longer. Mine clearance alone can take months, and the psychological impact on global shipping markets often lasts even longer. A realistic estimate is that the Strait of Hormuz could remain unstable for several months, possibly 3 to 6. Even intermittent disruptions would have major consequences for the global economy, because the countries most dependent on this corridor are also some of the largest manufacturing centers on Earth. China imports roughly 37 to 38% of its oil through this route. India depends on it for roughly 15%. Japan and South Korea each rely on the corridor for around 12%. In other words, much of Asia's industrial system is directly tied to the stability of this narrow passage. Oil prices have already responded. Global benchmarks have moved above $100 per barrel at moments during the crisis. They moved even higher. The International Energy Agency has released hundreds of millions of barrels from strategic reserves, but even this intervention has struggled to stabilize markets. Energy costs are now climbing across multiple sectors: transportation, petrochemicals, industrial production, shipping. These increases are already feeding into manufacturing costs. Factories across Asia are facing higher energy bills, higher logistics expenses, and tighter margins. Eventually, these higher costs do not remain inside Asia. They travel across the global supply chain. Asian manufacturing exports feed directly into Western consumer markets: electronics, machinery, consumer goods, automobiles. If production costs rise in Asia, export prices eventually rise as well. And that means consumers in Europe and North America begin paying more. The inflation effect is already becoming visible. In the United States, gasoline prices have risen significantly. In Europe, liquefied natural gas prices have surged dramatically, even though Europe imports relatively little crude oil through the Strait of Hormuz. Its energy markets remain tightly linked to global supply conditions. When oil markets tighten, natural gas prices often follow. That is why energy shocks rarely stay localized. They spread across continents, across industries, across financial markets. The result is a slow but powerful transmission mechanism. Middle East instability raises oil prices. Higher oil prices increase manufacturing costs in Asia. Higher production costs push export prices upward, and those price increases eventually appear on store shelves in Western economies. The global supply chain is once again under pressure, and the longer the conflict continues, the more visible those economic consequences will become. This is why even a lower intensity war still matters enormously, because the true danger is not only military escalation, it is economic persistence. A conflict that lasts 6 months can reshape supply chains, shift trade flows, and push inflation higher across the entire global system. In other words, the world may not be witnessing a short war. It may be entering a long strategic standoff, one fought with fewer missiles, but with consequences that extend far beyond the battlefield.